Don't sign that. I said it like a secret, like a prayer that had to get out before the pen hit the paper, and I watched a CEO freeze mid-signature with the whole city sleeping around us, because sometimes the only thing between a company and a cliff is the guy emptying the trash. Be honest. If it were you and a janitor whispered that your lawyers were steering you into a trap, would you stop your hand? Or would you smile? Say thanks and keep signing anyway. It was almost midnight, the hour when office towers feel hollow, when the glass conference rooms turn into aquariums, and the people who actually know things finally stop performing for each other. I was rolling my cart, the squeaky wheel, the little caddy of sprays and rags, the bin liners, and I saw a packet lying open on the table, heavy stock-color tabs, the subtle perfume of freshly printed lies. 2 clauses jumped off the page the way a snake's pattern pops in dry grass. Sections 12 to 15. Beneficial ownership waterfalls with cute names and ugly intentions, and a debt assumption tucked into a paragraph that read like it was written to be skipped. My heart stuttered. My mouth moved before fear could catch up. Don't sign that. Sign. She looked up, slow pen floating just above the signature line. Chin tilted the way people tilt their chins when they're not sure yet whether to be annoyed or impressed. Excuse me, she said. Not cold, just calibrating. Brooke Hamilton. 32, sharp blue eyes, a suit that understood lighting, the kind of CEO who can speak in bullet points without slides. Why would you say that? I kept my hands off the paper like it might be wired. Because that clause hands control to shells you'll never be able to audit, and that clause over there saddles you with debt that doesn't appear in the main disclosure, and there's a side letter missing from your closing checklist that probably says the quiet part out loud. The room hummed. HVAC, white noise, late elevator, clicks far away, my own pulse. Pattern interrupt. Tiny silence. Her pen set itself down like it was heavier than it looked. Who are you? She asked, not dismissive, more curious than anything, like her brain had already filed me as a new variable. And how do you know what an ownership waterfall is? Names matter in rooms like that. They can open a door or shut it forever. Marcus Thompson. I said, steady as I could manage, night custodial, single father, former corporate attorney. Harvard Law. 8 years in M&A. Disbarred after I reported judicial corruption. Yeah, that happened. You could feel the air lean. People hear disbarred and they think crook or loudmouth or fool. They don't think whistleblower whose honesty got labeled misconduct. They don't think guy who told the truth and watched his career dissolve like paper under a faucet. Brooke didn't flinch. She surprised me by doing the simplest thing most people never do. She listened. Show me, she said. So I showed her. Not with speeches with fingers hovering just above the text, with questions about cross-references and places where commas hide knives, with a map in my head of the way dirty money dresses up as investment capital. The language was precise. Traps usually are. And the structure was familiar enough to make my skin crawl offshore, holding companies with friendly names, debt that looked like consideration, until you followed its leash triggers, worded like safety rails, that would only activate once she had already gone over the edge. Why would my lawyers let this through? She asked, soft. Not to me. Not really, more to the ceiling. I took a breath. Because it looks aggressive but defensible, growth-focused, shareholder-aligned, all the words that make people feel brave, I said. And because no one gets paid a bonus for telling you to slow down. She looked me over. The uniform, the gloves, the cart. And she did something I didn't expect. She said, walk me through it, and slid the packet back like it might bite if she kept it any closer. We worked until 2 a.m. My cart a metronome in the corner, the clock crawling, the kind of focus that eats time without chewing. At some point she asked the question I had been hoping to dodge. If you can do this, why are you doing that? I kept my eyes on the page. I reported judges who took money, I said, even practiced like you lift a hot pan with 2 fingertips quick so you don't blister. They were prosecuted and convicted. I was called disloyal, reckless, unfit to be trusted with clients. Firms don't hire the guy who might blow the whistle again. The bar found a way to call the truth a breach. My marriage didn't survive the fallout. My daughter did because I picked health insurance and predictable hours over a war I couldn't afford to keep fighting. She shook her head in that accountant way, disappointment divided by disbelief. So you told the truth and lost your job. That's the short version. Is there a long version? Yeah, I said, glancing at the time, but your signature is in more danger than my pride right now. Don't sign this. Not tonight, not ever, without independent counsel who isn't on anyone's Christmas card list. Pull the data room logs. Demand every side letter. Sit with a forensic accountant and a pot of coffee and don't leave the table until the math stops lying. If it were you, she asked, what would you do in the next 10 minutes? Turn the lights back on, I said. Make whoever's waiting for your signature feel seen. Scare them into making the next mistake. We postponed the signing. The building exhaled. I went home before sunrise and made pancakes that looked like states we hadn't visited because my daughter Ka had a theory that good breakfasts changed grades, and I wanted every edge we could afford. She's 10 sharper than anyone expects at that age, the kind of kid who asks the questions you dodge when you're tired. Dad, why do people hire bad lawyers if they could hire good ones? I smiled at the frying pan and told the truth. Because the bad ones tell you what you want to hear. The good ones tell you what's true. By 9 a.m., Brooke called. Mr. Thompson, she said, voice clipped but alive, the adrenaline tone of someone who decided not to crash. I dug into your case last night. And I found something else. I went back past security with a nod. I wasn't used to getting stepped into the legal library that still smells like leather and decisions, and she pushed a printed docket across the table with one finger. Is this the same Richard Crane, she asked, tapping the name like it insulted her. Twist. The lead attorney shepherding her merger was one of the men whose world went sideways after I reported the bribery ring years ago. A technician with a scalpel for ethics, the kind of person who treats the law like a language you can rearrange until it says your name. Revenge dressed as paperwork. The moment I saw it, I felt something old and ugly wake up in my chest. So this isn't just a bad deal, Brooke said, watching my face. It's a trap built by someone who hates you. It's both, I said, and he's good at this. If it were you, what would you have done? Called PR, called the board, called your therapist and cried in a parking garage, or called the people with badges who speak conspiracy like a first language. We called the feds. Agent David Chen listened, really listened. No smirk, no gotcha, just questions that made the room feel warmer. And when he asked for my notes, I gave him everything, no drama, just the receipts. That afternoon, the retaliation crawled out of the drywall. A car parked across from our building. Engine cold camera pointed up at our windows. A man who pretended to be bored and did not blink. An anonymous email to management about a disgraced former attorney working nights near confidential documents. A call to Kay's school painting me as volatile, dangerous. The kind of whisper that sits in a file waiting to surface when you need it least. Fear is an accountant that charges interest. You start counting exits in any room you enter. Your hands memorize the shape of your kid's backpack. You check the peephole twice before you open. You know what I mean. Then the smear. Headlines nobody verified because outrage is cheaper than proofs. Phrases like unauthorized practice of law tossed around like confetti, because it scares anyone who doesn't know how often that label gets used to quiet inconvenient competence. It worked on some people. It didn't work on Brooke. It terrified Ka, and that was enough to get me packed in an hour when Agent Chen called and said it's time to move you both somewhere safe. Safe meant a place with cameras and quiet hallways, and rules you follow even if they make you feel like furniture. Angela Foster, Brooke's general counsel, showed up with her laptop and a face scrubbed clean of corporate theater. She didn't defend herself or the prior process. I should have seen the ownership waterfalls, she said, not whining, just taking on weight that was always hers. I trusted the wrong person. I nodded and took a breath I needed. Sophisticated fraud is designed to look like ambition, I said. That's why it passes checklists. Checklists are built to catch mistakes, not lies. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. We jammed a stick in the gear. Emergency filings, data room subpoenas, a temporary freeze on transfers that were already packing their bags for the other side of the world. For about 12 hours, the other side looked rattled. Then they did what cockroaches do. They adapted. A parallel set of shells appeared, a second closing packet surfaced with familiar pages and new traps, and somewhere in that mess came paperwork meant to bury me. Bar complaints about me practicing law by reading aloud what they'd written to trick her civil suits accusing Brooke and me of extortion because we dared to call fraud by its name. If you've never watched the legal system used as a weapon, here's the trick. The goal isn't winning. The goal is scaring you into folding. In the middle of all that, the moment I'd been dreading found me anyway. Ka sat at the little table they used for schoolwork in the safe house, coloring the 3 branches of government like they were a family. And she asked in a voice that knew the answer and needed it anyway. Dad, do you have to keep helping Miss Brooke if it means bad people can hurt us? She didn't say please. She didn't have to. Children are not theoretical. I told her about pensions and paychecks and people who never see a conference room except in a holiday party selfie. I told her about how a single signature could hollow out a town, how a clever paragraph could ruin someone who does everything right. I told her about duty and how I hadn't gone looking for this, how sometimes the fight picks you. She listened, like brave people listen, quietly without interrupting. And when I finished, she said the sentence that cut me to the bone. Those people aren't my family. Do you think that's fair? That night I called Brooke. I can't keep doing shadow work, I said, voice low, because Ka was finally asleep, and I didn't have a second self to spare. We pushed this through the front door. Injunctions, sworn statements, your filings, FBI affidavits, and we do it now. If they want to try me for unauthorized practice because I helped you read the booby traps they built for you, let them do it under oath where sunlight is free. The next 72 hours were a blender. Angela drafting declarations tight enough to bounce Agent Chen's team moving like chess players with extra clocks, Brooke on the phone with a board that had finally realized the fire was real. We walked into court with file boxes and swallowed pride, and the judge, the right combination of patient and sharp, read faster than anyone I've ever seen read. We walked out with a freeze that stopped money mid-flight, wire feathers suspended in the wind, and for a long, thin minute in a fluorescent hallway, I let myself understand the word relief. Retaliation doubled again. Bar letters, fake CPS calls a film crew pretending to cover a marathon that did not exist outside our gate. Agent Chen stared at the chaos with a look I've only seen on surgeons and parents at 3 a.m. We can't promise they won't come after you, he said. We can promise to be standing next to you when they do. Not the comfort you want, the comfort that exists. Then the quiet raid. The kind that doesn't make TV because there's no door to kick, just a list of names to email servers to image subpoenas to serve, and people in nice suits discovering that the system they use to crush others can press back just fine. We followed money through 3 countries and 2 time zones and 1 private equity fund with a feral appetite. We found side letters that forgot to lie convincingly. We found texts that might as well have said we did the crime. And we found something like repentance in a junior associate who realized she had backed the wrong gods. You came for a showdown. Here it is. Federal courtroom wood polished by the hands of 100 years, a judge who looked like he hated theater and loved rules, a row of defendants who were used to being the ones other people were afraid of. I wore a jacket I could not afford before I picked up a mop. I told the truth like I was teaching a child not to touch a stove. Simple, repeatable, no adjectives where a verb will do. How did I know? Because language leaves fingerprints, because greed has a rhythm, because I have seen enough paper to recognize when it's pretending to be something it isn't. Richard Crane stared like he could put me back in the hole his friends dug years ago by sheer force of gaze. He tried to make it about old grudges. The evidence made it about math. Ownership waterfalls don't care how you feel about the guy who noticed them. The gavel fell. Not a movie sound, a real one. Heavy, final. a punctuation mark that closes the mouth on men who never thought their mouths could be closed. Decades, the kind that count slowly. Brooke squeezed my hand once, gratitude, respect, boundaries, and I stepped outside and called Ka. We told the truth, I said. It was enough. She asked if we could get pancakes, and I said yes because that's what victory tastes like when you're 10. 18 months later, life didn't go back to normal. It built a new one. Brooke's company didn't just survive, it changed. Not with slogans or glossy compliance posters, but with slower deals and meaner questions, and a habit of tracing ownership until the paper bled honesty. Angela opened a training center that looked like a law school married a crime lab, and I taught rooms full of lawyers how to spot the tells buried in their own work. The comma that moves liability, the definition that hides a debt, the offhand phrase that opens a door you think is locked. The FBI borrowed pieces of our process. Other companies called to ask the question no one likes asking. What are we missing? The bar process was slower than headlines where villains get vanquished and heroes get medals. Letters hearings, a committee that wanted to use words like public service without saying the word sorry. Some people looked at me and saw a man who paid an old bill. Others saw a man they would never trust, because the story they believe about the world requires people like me to be wrong. I kept working. I kept parenting. Ka kept building a little contract scanner on her tablet, because kids turn their fears into projects. When you give them a quiet room and tell them their ideas matter. One afternoon, Brooke pulled me into a sunlit office with a view and a door that closed like a promise. Chief Legal Officer. She said a sentence with a salary attached and a target painted clean across its face. I thought about visibility and danger, and how many men like Richard don't retire so much as regroup. I thought about Ka and school, and whether a title buys peace or just better locks. And I said something most people don't say when the numbers get big. We structure this. I told her, we keep me out of anything that smells like organized crime. We invest in training that makes me replaceable. We build privacy into the job, so my kid can sleep, and we make the work about preventing fires, not racing into them for glory. She didn't blink. Deal, she said. But you keep teaching. If it were you, would you take the title or keep the quiet? Do you think it's fair that telling the truth cost me my career before it rebuilt it? That the same system that punished me for naming corruption called me when it needed help cleaning up the mess? We worship credentials in this country. Diplomas like passports, titles like armor. But credentials can be bought or bent, and competence shows up in uniforms you're trained not to see. We tell people like me to stay in our lanes, and when we don't, we threaten them with rules designed to protect the public, but used too often to protect the powerful. Unauthorized practice. It's important, it keeps people safe, and it's also a club. Some folks swing at anyone whose expertise makes them uncomfortable. Both of those things can be true at the same time. That tension, that's the part we have to talk about in daylight. So here's where I leave it with you. When rules are used as weapons, what do we owe each other? What do we owe the truth? What do we owe the kids who ask? Are we safe while we stare at a form that can wreck a town? If it were you, what would you have done? Shut up and keep the job, or speak up and risk the roof? And if you say speak up, do you mean always or only when it's someone else's paycheck on the line? Do you think that's fair? If you're still here, thank you. Really. Now jump in. Tell me in the comments if Brooke did the right thing trusting a janitor over a polished legal team. Tell me if the bar was right or wrong to hammer a whistleblower who turned out to be correct. Tell me what scares you more, a fraud you can't see, or a system that punishes people who point at it. If you've signed something you didn't really understand and paid for it later, share it so someone else can avoid the bruise. Hit like. If you think competence beats credentials, subscribe. If you want more stories told plain and unedited, and tell me your city, so I know where this lands. Somewhere right now, a pen is hovering over paper, and a room is very quiet. Sometimes it only takes a whisper to save everything. Don't sign that.